Developing story this hour, police have confirmed the death of an investigator into the Thabo Bester escape case. The senior officer was the provincial head of organized crime in the Free State province. ENCA senior reporter Slindelo Masigana is joining us now live for an update on this. She is, of course, in Bloemfontein, where earlier today she was in court in that Nandipa Makudumana application, which was dismissed with cause. But let's focus on the story of the death of this investigator. Slindelo, good afternoon. What do we know about this information of the death of one of the investigators in this Thabo Bester case?
Tragic news this afternoon, just in Braddan. Just moments ago I was informed that there had been a death, that there was a possibility that one of the investigators in this Thabo Bester escape saga had passed away. At that point I was still trying to confirm whether this was a shooting incident, whether this was a suicide, because the information I had at the time was confirmation that this particular police officer had shot and killed themselves at a police station here in Bloemfontein. I also have been told that the police officer was also in fact in court this morning for that judgment in the urgent court bid by Dr. Nandipa Makudumana. We do though have a statement that's recently been released by the South African Police's spokesperson, that is Atlenda Mate. I'm just going to read from it, Braddan. It says that the SAPS can confirm the death of one of the investigators into the Thabo Bester escape case. Circumstances surrounding the senior officer's death, who is also the provincial head of organized crime in the Free State province, remains the subject of a police investigation. The SAPS management wishes not to discuss the matter in the public domain at this early stage. In-house employee health and wellness experts, which include chaplains, have been dispatched to provide psychosocial services to the family and the colleagues of the deceased member. The National Commissioner of the SAPS, General Fani Masimula, has described the member as a hard-working, loyal and dedicated detective with 31 years of service. Over the years, he has proven himself to be a highly skilled detective with a wealth of experience and knowledge in the detective environment. His departure leaves a void in the SAPS detective environment. And that statement, of course, being signed off by Atlenda Mate, who is at the headquarters of the SAPS. At this point, as you can tell from the statement itself, being very scant in terms of the details surrounding this incident. But like I said, Braddan, from the sources that we have been speaking to, it does seem as though this may have been a suicide, as the officer did shoot and kill himself this afternoon, from what we understand, at a police station here in Bloemfontein. But of course, as you've also heard from the statement, that this was a senior member of the SAPS, and in fact the provincial head of crime intelligence here in the Free State. So certainly a major loss for the SAPS services, but of course investigations ongoing into exactly the circumstances around this particular incident.
Yes, the provincial head of organized crime in the Free State. I guess your sources, Slindelo, indicating he may have shot and killed himself, would sort of align with that line in the statement that you've just read for us from Atlenda Mate, saying that in-house employee health and wellness. When you speak about employee health and wellness experts going to give psychosocial support and counseling to the family, it could indicate a veracity. Of course, we have to wait for confirmation of what your sources have told you about the circumstances under which he died.
Certainly so. Of course, this initial statement not really wanting to give much detail, Braddan, just merely confirming that there has been a death, and this is obviously somebody who was quite pivotal or crucial in the investigations into the matter of the escape saga. You would remember that we already have testimony from one of the investigators in the task team, which we heard from in the magistrate's court. That is, of course, Mr. Flyman, who we know, of course, is also quite high-ranking in the police services. So initially, that was what I was trying to ascertain as to who it was, because we already know the identity of at least one of the investigators, but we can confirm that it is not the investigator who was giving testimony during the bail applications, but of course just another member of that particular team, who of course is quite a high-ranking member. And so it is quite sad news, of course, not only for his family and of course the SAPS, but of course the circumstances around why or how this happened still need to be ascertained. And at this point, from what we can gather from the statement, is that it does seem as though the SAPS services just want some room or some space to be able to ventilate the circumstances around this death.
Yes, and I guess we can't speculate about this, Lindelo, but from the statement you've read, what the Commissioner of Police, Fani Masumula, is saying, the death of this investigator is going to leave a big hole in the detective environment and of the police. I just wonder what impact, if any at all, it will have in the Thabo Bester escape matter. I guess we'll have to wait and see, and I'm sure Lindelo will find out a little bit more for us about what's really happened and what's going to happen, and if there'll be any impact at all on the investigation that's underway into the Thabo Bester escape. Thank you very much. Slindelo Masigane, live to us from Mangaung about this sad news of the death of one of the investigators in the Thabo Bester case. Apparently, from sources Slindelo has cited, he shot and killed himself at a police station after attending this morning's court appearance of Dr. Nandipha Magudumane, which was dismissed with cost, where she was applying on an urgent basis for her arrest in Tanzania to be declared unlawful.
Well, let's bring in senior reporter Griselda Lewis, who is live for us, we understand, from where the incident took place. Griselda, good evening to you. Tell us where you are and just to shed more light on what's been a deadly twist to the saga. What else are we learning?
Well, that's right, Iman. You would recall a bit earlier on today we were in the High Court in Bloemfontein for that judgment regarding the application that Dr. Nandipha Magudumane had brought regarding what she said was her unlawful arrest and the process that followed then of her deportation to South Africa. She wanted that to be declared unlawful by the court. But of course, as we've been reporting throughout the course of the day, you would know now, of course, that application has been dismissed. However, what that court subsequently found is they said that, in fact, on the grounds that Dr. Nandipha Magudumane, you'd recall, initially she had brought this application on, saying that what took place in Tanzania and her being brought to South Africa was not a deportation, but essentially was a disguised extradition. So the court, Iman, essentially agreeing with her on that part, in that, she had alleged that there'd been some kind of collusion between the South African government as well as their counterparts in Tanzania, or some agreement to bring her back to South Africa. And indeed, as you indicated, I am live at the scene of where that tragic incident had taken place. In that report that you just gave, the police are indicating that they're still investigating the circumstances surrounding the death of one of the investigators in the Thabo Bester escape saga. But, sources are telling us at this stage, as well as people that were in this area and close to here, who we'll speak to in just a moment, and we will keep them anonymous. Some of them heard a gunshot, they say, going off, and they thought that there had been an accident that had taken place, but then they saw this entire area had been cordoned off, and of course that was when the pathology van was also brought through to this area. I'm really going to be very sensitive in how I handle this particular matter, Iman, in that you would see here towards me, here is what we understand from the bystanders here. This is what appears to be the window of a vehicle, and we're told from those who are stationed right here at some of the buildings in this area that this is the window as a result that came off the vehicle of the car that the investigating officer was inside. And we're not going to show you, Iman, also where we are stationed here, you can still see there are still some blood stains on the floor of where this incident had taken place. Of course, we had to drive around and try to confirm from various sources around this area where this might have taken place. We understand that the police officer, or the investigating officer, who has now since passed on, was inside court this morning when that judgment was being handed down. So this certainly does put a twist in this particular matter, Iman. Right here where we're standing at the moment, you can still see remnants of the glass of the window from that vehicle, where we understand from people around here, while police of course say they're investigating the circumstances surrounding what had taken place, and of course are not giving much detail at this particular time, and understandably so. Of course, there would be those sources who would tell us, that it's understood that the police officer had shot himself, and I'm going to speak to some of the people around this area. We're not going to show them on camera. Some had heard a gunshot go off. Iman, also here next to me, again, I must reiterate, we're not going to show some of the bloodstains that are on the floor at this particular time, but we can confirm indeed that this is where the crime scene itself is here in Bloemfontein, not too far as well from the Bloemfontein High Court where we were a bit earlier on. I'm going to bring in some of the individuals. We won't show their faces, Iman. What is it that they saw or heard taking place in this area? a re jwetse gore re teng ntate
ha o monate
eh
ntho ya Thabo Bester e re amme setjhaba sa Free State.
okay o bone eng today montate
sebetsa mona na masipaleng hona jwale tjena ke fitla ke bolellwa ke ma security ba katileng mosebetsi wa dilori tsa masipala ba mpela gore motho ke a nketa ho shwa a ipolela ka koloi lebaka ke eng gore tšhelete a se ka dumella tšhelete e re buse botho pele bona ntate o ipolaetseng ha ile go ipolaile ke mathata a mo palameng bitsong la tšhelete a ke re khutleng ntho ya Thabo Bester ke e fele man.
all right ntate ha re tsebe the circumstances around gore go tse eng mar ra leboga haholo ka nako ya hao ntate let me just bring you in as well you were in this area you say when you saw this area was cordoned off.
Yeah, I was driving this road, heavy road.
Yeah.
It was around 12 o'clock. That's when I saw police cars, and the road was closed, like from this robot until that one there at the bottom. Yeah. So I even saw the mortuary government cars. You see this parking? Yeah, I also saw that parking. Yes. Yeah.
All right, let me bring in another gentleman just very quickly who tells us that he had heard a gunshot go off. We're also not going to show his face at this time. And Tate, just tell us what is it that you heard in this area?
The only thing that I heard is the gunshot. I was at my workplace, so that's why I thought it was an accident. But then after a certain time, few minutes, I saw people were screaming, talking about it. Then I wanted to appear there, and I saw it from a distance. A lot of cars there, the robots, but I didn't go there. But I did hear the gunshot only.
Thank you very much to all of the individuals in this particular area. I'm going to ask my colleague to come back to us without showing the faces of the individuals that we spoke to. Just to translate the Iman, these were people who were working in this area. The last gentleman says the only thing that he heard was a gunshot going off, and he thought perhaps it had been an accident, and then he heard when people were screaming that this incident had taken place. The other gentleman that we spoke to also telling us there that he's very saddened by what has taken place. He was also in this area, also heard about what had taken place, and was confirmed by other individuals in this area that indeed a police officer had died at this particular location. And also the other gentleman telling us after the incident had taken place, this large road here behind me had been cordoned off for quite a while. So looking at the time frames of when this had taken place, and Iman also given the fact that you have the scene itself that has since been cleared, this incident took place much earlier on this afternoon. Remember that the judgment that was handed down in the High Court in Bloemfontein was handed down at 10 o'clock this morning. I would roughly estimate, even though I didn't count at the time, I think we were in there for about, say, an hour or so, until of course we had done some reaction pertaining to that judgment that was handed down. But of course then we understand that the police officer, who has now since passed away, was inside the court when that judgment was being handed down, and he had been attending court proceedings. What a bearing this will have on the case, Iman, we certainly cannot tell at this stage, but indeed the police commissioner, Fani Masimula, sending his condolences. Investigations are still continuing at this stage, and of course police are indicating that they're investigating the circumstances surrounding his death at this particular stage. It certainly does put a twist in this particular matter. I guess what bearing it will have on the case, remember that there might be or is a team of investigators working on this matter. We also understand from the police that psychosocial support is also being provided to the colleagues of that police officer, as well as the family of the police officer who has since passed away. But of course here, the remnants of what had taken place, you can still see towards my left here. We've been pointed towards this direction, and confirmed indeed from several people around here that indeed this is where this unfortunate incident has taken place. But certainly I think, looking at or judging from the statement that the police had sent out, a very tragic incident relating to this particular case. I guess what bearing it will have, Iman, once again, we will know in the coming days, because you would know that given that Dr. Nandi Pamakudumana has lost her application in the High Court to declare her arrest and detention unlawful, her lawyers had also basically went to see her in prison, that is at the Kroonstad Detention Facility or Correctional Services Facility, where she is being held. And we're now hearing from her lawyers, that was earlier reported of course from my colleague Kamukelo Siokwe, that Dr. Nandi Makudumana's lawyers are now taking that High Court judgment on appeal. So it certainly seems like it's going to be a long road pertaining to this particular case. But all of them, once again, Dr. Nandi Makudumana, Thabo Bester, and the other accused in this matter are back in the Bloemfontein Magistrates Court on the 20th of this month.
Griselda, thank you for that comprehensive wrap. And I guess there's just one question that lingers in the air, given the extraordinary events associated with Thabo Bester and the escape, or the crazy and weird happenings, some might say, that nothing is lost on the public, and people are already starting to attempt, at least, to join the dots between, you know, what happened in court and how this particular individual passed away. And it is curious, wouldn't you say, Griselda, that if indeed you are where this location is, the police would have left some of the artifacts which might be germane to their case, and the artifacts meaning some of the evidence behind, you know, without gathering it all up. What does it mean for any investigation into the circumstances of his passing?
Look, Iman, I wouldn't want to draw any inference, you know, on what would be out there in the public domain. You know, very much you know, a lot has been said in the public domain regarding this particular case. But, you know, in particular, for example, if we talk about that application that Dr. Nandipha Makudumana, you know, had lost in the High Court today, I don't want to draw any inference pertaining to what happened there and what subsequently happened here. But my sources are telling me that the police officer who passed away, who has since passed on, was inside court today when that judgment was being handed down. And I believe that police had been stationed here for a very long while into this afternoon, gathering what they needed, of course, I guess, for their investigation, which they talk about in that clip that you have from the police spokesperson, Athlenda Mate, as well as the statement that was released by the South African Police Service. But certainly, you know, if you have the public, of course, who will, as you say, connect the dots, I really don't want to be drawn into perhaps that kind of commentary. But of course, this is a twist in this particular matter. We have now one of the police officers or the investigators in this particular case who has now since passed on. We will know in the next coming days, or get a clearer understanding about what that means for this particular case. But I must say, he is not the only investigating officer in this matter, because I understand that the head of the organised crime unit here in the Free State is not the same as the witness that had taken the stand in the Bloemfontein Magistrates Court, you would recall, who had taken the stand basically in opposing bail for the accused that had been appearing in the dock at the time. You'd recall it was only Nastasia Janssen who was granted bail in that particular court. So I can confirm at this particular stage it is not that investigating officer, which will give you an idea, Iman, that there's a team of investigators that are working on this particular matter. So I can't really draw any inference at this particular stage on what bearing it might have in the case. And given the fact that there was a court sitting and we had you know, a judgment that was handed down, and what subsequently took place a couple of hours later, just after court, in the death of this police officer. So at this particular stage, the South African Police Service, as I indicated, not saying what the circumstances were that led to his death. They're still investigating, but of course other sources are telling us, including the bystanders who work in this particular area, who heard the gunshot, who also witnessed, you know, this particular area being cordoned off much later on today, basically saying that, you know, there was a large police presence, there was a pathology van here. So I would guess that all that police needed to do within that time frame to do their investigations, they would have gathered everything that they needed to gather here. But certainly I know at this stage as well that the family of that police officer has also asked for privacy at this time as they try to deal with their tragic loss.
Thank you very much.